Kia ora everyone, my name's Sean, I'm from Stronghold, up from Christchurch for the night. I've been here about 7 weeks. I've moved back to New Zealand recently after coming back from San Francisco where Stronghold is headquartered. We've just opened up an office in Christchurch. Stronghold is largely based on Stellar, so that's why I will be giving you a run through of Stellar today. Just for interest, it'd be good to canvass the room a little bit. I'm not from Auckland. It'd be interesting to know how many of you own crypto. Can you put your hands up? Okay, so that's pretty good. How many of you have actually heard of Stellar or know anything much about Stellar? Okay, so that's pretty good, not bad. Developers in the room? Okay, all right, and people working in crypto? Okay, a few. Fantastic, great. So what is Stellar? It's a global open source protocol for payments, and it's very verticalized for exactly this. It's maintained by the Stellar Development Foundation out in San Francisco. They started back in 2014, originally as a fork of Ripple, so there's quite a few similarities there in the past. However, after facing some initial challenges with the code base, they put too many people on a little too fast, they ended up rewriting the protocol, so it's a much different beast today. What is the role of the foundation? It's to continue development of the code at this stage. The goal is later down the track to be able to push that out to other organisations and accept enhancements from the community. It's to promote the expansion of the Stellar network across the world and also member collaboration through their partnerships program. What are the key features of Stellar? The really important one at the top there is the idea of tokenization on Stellar. This is built into the protocol, right? So they have the ability to tokenize any asset, whether that be cryptocurrency or real world, and place it on the Stellar blockchain. Speed is very important here for payments network. They have a block speed of 3 to 5 seconds, right, is the ledger close time. And this is due to the different consensus algorithm, which we'll touch on a little bit later. So you're not waiting around 10, 20, 30 minutes for a Bitcoin transaction to go through and be confirmed by the other parties. So this is a lot more suitable for payments, right, which is why that is the case. As well, low fees. 1 cent will pay for about 100,000 transactions. That is $1 New Zealand cent. Because it is built for payments again, scalability, we're looking at about 1,000 plus concurrent transactions per second. Some tests reveal maybe 2,000 or 3,000, but on the live network, that's what we see at the network level. We have seen some people put through stress testing on the network where applications have broken, but the core network itself has been shown to handle those sort of numbers. The next point really bleeds into compliance as well. It's really important here that you trust the validators that you trust to confirm transactions for you on the network, which means known parties are actually signing off on transactions that you're looking at, which is very important for a regulatory point of view, right? And finally, the piece that Stronghold really loves, compliance. Built into the protocol is a very handy feature that allows you to essentially label certain assets that you've brought in as tokens as needing authorization to hold. One of the simplest use cases for that would be to do identity on people, right? So you can have assets that can only be traded by people who have been identified to certain financial institutions, or you can choose to not have that at all, and that suits different use cases. So this is the currency that most people think about when they hear of Stellar. This is the intrinsic currency built into the protocol. So I think 100 billion of these were created back in 2014. And they were owned by the Stellar Development Foundation. It's their mandate to distribute 95% of those through various programs. They enable the real-time transfer of value. You can use them as a settlement tool. And the more interesting piece when you have tokens is as a bridge currency between different transactions, different currencies. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. So really, what does this enable? One of the biggest problems that Stellar is trying to solve is global remittance, cross-border payments, right? Whereas Ripple originally started targeting larger banks, corporates, Stellar was really focused on helping the underbanked, right? So their big areas of interest are Southeast Asia, India. They do quite a bit of work in EMEA, and Africa is another big area for them. We'll see them opening their, I think it's Singapore or Hong Kong, office quite soon. So they're really interested in the movement of funds into these sorts of locations, and we see their early partnerships focusing there. So one of the first complete remittance flows that they had running was into the Philippines, which of course is a huge destination for expats sending back funds. That's my heritage as well. My mother is Filipino. It's one of the reasons I got into the space to start with. So I absolutely love their mission in trying to promote financial inclusion. So how do they do this? Well, it's based on the idea of anchors. So this is a trust-based system. Some of you will be familiar with Tethers or some of the other stablecoin projects. This idea of anchoring has been around for years. Essentially, you trust some organisation, could be an individual, to hold credits on your behalf. So what would this look like for a New Zealand dollar anchor? So say you wanted to get New Zealand dollars inside Stellar. You would deposit 10 New Zealand dollars with the anchor institution, which is going to be a financial institution, so financial service provider, bank, that sort of thing. They will give you $10 corresponding token inside the Stellar network. So essentially they hold those $10 in trust for you, they take custody of them and issue the asset to you inside the network. Now that that asset is tokenized and represented inside the network, you can transfer it with all those benefits from the earlier slide. So you get the 2 to 5 second transference sort of thing. You're able to trade it on Stellar's distributed exchange. So Stellar has an exchange directly built into it, right? So you can place orders directly inside Stellar on global order books. And that's really important for pricing when it comes to remittance. One of the problems we have with remittance pricing at the moment is every financial institution that does this gets to set their own pricing. And most consumers won't even know what price they're actually paying. They see no fees and they think, great. Of course, all of the fat for those corporations is hiding inside those Forex rates, right? And most people don't really know what they're reading there. It's a bunch of very long numbers that don't really mean much. And they think, oh, it's higher or lower than last time, great. They're not seeing the spread between the buys and the sells. And each institution is essentially running its own bucket shop of liquidity. The difference with Stellar is that if you are trading the currencies inside Stellar, everyone is on one single global order book, right? Which means everyone is trading against everyone else. So if you're a remittance provider or you're a trader or a liquidity provider looking to make money trading Forex, you have to compete with all the other providers on the network to get the consumer's money, which means that the consumer should be getting the best price. It's the best price in the world, if those providers are on the network, of course. So how do they get the money out? They will have to offboard with Anchor on the other side. Currently, we see remittance providers actually becoming anchors. So one of the first ones we saw come on to stay on for a long time was coins.ph. So coins.ph is a Philippine peso anchor, and we've seen Tempo come on in Europe for euro. So you could, and they both do remittance as their day-to-day business. Coins.ph also does exchange operations. So you could easily move money between Europe and Philippines solely using Stellar. Now at the moment it's a wee bit clunky. You might interface with some of the Stellar-specific pieces, but the idea is that in the future you just wouldn't notice the anchors at all. The remittance providers would plug into the network. Looks like normal remittance for you, but you're getting the advantages of speed, cheap transactions, and good global liquidity. It's powered by these market makers, as I mentioned. The idea is that people who are trading these currencies on board to Stellar, those could be the anchors, they could be the remittance companies themselves, or companies that their business is just to trade currencies. So Stellar is actively trying to court traditional players in that space to come and trade currencies so that your end users are able to move funds. A little bit on their software architecture. I'm not going to go down the development rabbit hole today. But one thing I did want to point out that is interesting about Stellar, and we start to see more protocols doing this now, but it was they were one of the earlier ones to give easier access to the data. So whereas Bitcoin, you have to create special tools to get really useful data out of the systems. You have to extract information out of the blockchain, process that yourself, and place that in databases. Stellar realised that's really annoying, and everyone needs to do it. So Stellar core data, so that's the main program running the network, actually puts data directly into a more traditional style database. So it's very easy for people to query. Additionally, it also dumps history information into a defined format file, which can go into storage like Amazon S3 or Google Cloud Storage, something like that. So it makes it really easy to extract and load Stellar data into your own processing tools. And this piece here makes it really easy for businesses to integrate if functionality isn't available on some of the other pieces that Stellar provides you out of the box. So they're really trying to make the whole integration piece a lot easier for people. So a little protocol comparison. It's not entirely fair because all of these things do have different use cases. You can see I've botched in some of the new transaction fees because they keep changing all the time. Originally, I think this stood at about $12. This was originally done when CryptoKitties were the thing, and this was obviously a lot higher as well. But for orders of magnitude, you're essentially looking at it's quite slow and reasonably expensive actually to send anything. Throughput's pretty poor. Ethereum, obviously there's a lot you can do with it, which is great. You're still going to be waiting a long time. Most providers out there still wait for a very high number of blocks before processing a transaction for you, even though they might not need to. Still relatively expensive, still kind of slow. I know that these numbers have come up. They're a little bit better these days, but still a long way from the Stellar numbers. So Stellar, again, very fast transaction confirmation time. You could have a POS system run on that, and people may or may not complain about it. You're looking at much cheaper transaction fees though, and that's the really interesting thing here, and high transaction throughput. What is one of the things that people are looking to do a lot right now? It's to tokenize and create ICO tokens through smart contracts, normally on something like Ethereum. So I wanted to have a look at how some of those benefits of Stellar earlier apply to people trying to do this, right? What do you need if you're trying to do an ICO? You need to be able to get an asset in there nice and easy. Decentralized exchange is nice to have if you can have it, not necessary. You probably want fast, cheap and scalable, and the last one, a limited attack surface. I'm not sure how many people are actually considering that when they're going out and doing these projects, but it's probably going to be quite important. It just happens that Stellar, having built something for cross-border payments platform, it actually suits ICO issuance very, very well in a lot of use cases, right? Which is rather serendipitous. What's the most popular one out there still? Ethereum. It's amazing and flexible. It does everything that you could want, but that comes at a cost, a literal cost, right? Transaction fees are high, storage is expensive, and the network gets really slowed when people actually try and push, high throughput of transactions through these things. Obviously, they are trying to improve this, and Ethereum's change of consensus later and some of their other features will hopefully come to solve some of these problems. But in the meantime, we're still stuck with something that can be brought to its knees pretty easily. So the example here, and I'm sure you've all heard of it time and time again, are the CryptoKitties, right? So those things absolutely broke the network. Earlier in was that late last year or earlier in the year? I can't really remember. But when this happened, all of the exchanges were panicking. Stronghold, our support desk, was just on fire because it brought the network to its knees. Transactions weren't confirming, or transactions were really expensive, and people were wondering where their money was. So things like that happening are not just a worry for service providers and consumers. It's actually really, really worrying for regulators because they can't have people, losing money and complaining to them. Because companies aren't really being honest about what the possible network conditions might be. People like to say, oh yeah, you'll get in 30 minutes, maybe 24 hours at the max. But people were waiting days for some transactions to come through. And it was the case that people were talking to regulators directly, complaining, consumers. So it's a problem across the board. Security is an issue here because it does everything. You have to treat it right, and developing for it is I'm going to say pretty difficult to do it properly, right? We've seen audited code with flaws go through, and it's not really a statement about the developers being bad or anything. It's just difficult to know how to treat some of this new technology. And unfortunately, a lot of these contracts are written that when you put the stuff up there, it's stuck. So of course, some famous problems with Ethereum. There's heaps and heaps of small ICO projects on Ethereum that went down the tubes because they weren't written correctly, or they had really strange implementations of standards. And it is really hard to audit these things. Big business opportunity. A lot of people are making a killing on auditing these ICOs. But I think people would agree that it is still very hard to audit these correctly because, one, the underlying technology is changing underneath you, right? There's releases of parity and Geth, week on week. And it's really hard to wait for, proper stable releases if you want to be keeping up with consensus. So sometimes you're forced to upgrade and you don't know how that's going to affect things. So Ethereum, it's a powerhouse, but it comes at a cost and you have to treat it right. What's the Stellar approach? Simple smart contracts. What Stellar gives you is a la carte selection of operations that you can do. So instead of having to code all your logic, you're kind of putting a puzzle together. So it comes with a set of very defined blocks that you put together to enforce certain rules that you might want in your ICO, which means there's none of the scripting going on. So the possibility of a developer making a mistake is much lower, and it makes it easier to audit because you're not reading new code, you're just reading applications of existing pieces, really. You don't need such specialized developers. Clearly, they're going to have to learn Stellar, but we think that your average developer will be able to pick it up a lot more easily, which is obviously better for businesses. The overall takeaway is really choose the platform that's right for your use case. It's not going to do everything for everyone because you are now restricted by predefined operations. So if you're writing an application on Ethereum, you're probably using smart contract features that aren't going to be available in Stellar. But if you're just issuing a token that you need traded to raise money for your project, or maybe you're going to call it a utility token or something like that, then Stellar probably is worth looking at. So we're starting to see tokens come on. In fact, IBM announced that they're going to release their first public token on top of Stellar. So we're hoping to see the adoption come up a lot more. I think Kin by Kik also moved onto Stellar as well because of the scalability problems. In fact, it was them that stress tested the network and broke a lot of people's applications. But it was good to show that the network stayed online. This is the bit that, as the strongholder in the room, I really like, and starting to talk to regulators, they like as well. Some of the predefined operations lend themselves really well to securities compliance. These are optional things. You don't have to have these in here. If you're just doing crypto stuff or in a different jurisdiction, fine, ignore it. But for people that do fall under these sorts of regulators, so securities law in New Zealand and obviously SEC, the subpoenas flying around everywhere, we hear about them every week, DIA for money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism in New Zealand, obviously want to know what's going on. Stellar has an authorization feature, and it's great for whitelisting token holders. So the issuer of an asset, so say Stronghold, which currently issues in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and we're looking to do fiat, if we issue Bitcoin to you, in some time in the future, we are going to demand that we've actually identified you through our KYC processes. Further, we're going to enforce that everyone who holds our token is identified to us, and that'll be the case from our fiat currency from day one. Reason being is, one, for custody, we have to know, okay, if we have $100 sitting in the bank, exactly who that belongs to. Obviously, for the banks to get banked in New Zealand, which is still a very difficult thing to do, they're going to want to know that we know who the people are holding our assets, right, and where that money's come from. Token lockups can be done with Stellar's scripting, which is great for, in the US, a lot of them are getting around some of the SEC issuing rules. If your token looks like a security, you can issue it to private investors and do a 12-month lockup period before it goes public. So Stellar totally supports that. It's not really a thing here. You can have some other things. Issue a trade approval will be something that Stronghold will be using quite soon, actually, and that allows us to issue assets out but only have certain parties hold and trade them. And asset recovery as well. You can effectively use it to freeze users' funds and have them return it to you, which is controversial. A lot of people really don't like the thought of, a financial institution being able to claw your money back. But in this case, a lot of the time, you're going to have to trust them anyway, because the idea is that I can take my $10 back to whatever institution, they'll give it back to me in the real life. So there's always this trust relationship between you and the issuer of that asset anyway. But it does allow fund freezing and funds clawback. The thing we really like about Stellar is that they went ahead and very early on built tools for compliance, exchanging KYC information between banks, for instance, or anchors or financial institutions operating on the network, which showed real forward thinking and is also a great thing to be able to talk to the regulators about when we walk into a room. Who is Stellar? What are they doing? Oh, well, actually, one of the first things they did is put together this compliance piece. So this is just one of the schematics for how a bank might implement information sharing. So you've got another bank out here, and here's the incoming bank. So it's really just a protocol that sits on top of Stellar that defines how people can share information. A little bit on Stronghold. We look like a retail cryptocurrency exchange today, but we're heading towards asset management platform. To start with, we'll be looking at cryptocurrencies. Later, we'll be dealing with some of the other tokens that come in and out of Stellar. One of our partners, for instance, is working on municipal bonds. We're expecting a whole heap of other real security and other sort of tokens to come onto the network shortly. But why is it that we, in particular, love Stellar? It's built exactly for what we need it to do, right? We can tokenize everything and have those tokens transfer basically at zero cost effectively, instantaneously to us. That's great. Integration's fairly easy. What more do we really need from that? Global liquidity. If we want to give our customers the best pricing, it's great to be able to tap into one integration to be able to access any number of liquidity providers in the network, all competing for our business, right? So pricing in the network should be fantastic, and obviously as a regulated company, compliance is very, very, very important for us. So we need to be able to, identify people along the whole chain. And we also love New Zealand. Why are we here? I quickly wanted to address this because people do wonder. We're headquartered in San Francisco, but we opened up a Christchurch office primarily for regulatory reasons. We also do development here now. But it has New Zealand has a really clear position on crypto assets compared to a lot of other jurisdictions. Binance, for instance, was looking at New Zealand just before they ended up going to Malta. Around the same time we were, so it was interesting talking to the law firms, and they're all saying, hey, there's this really big exchange looking at coming to New Zealand. It's a shame we missed them. I think they thought that things would be too slow in New Zealand, and they were getting a lot of benefits from some of those other jurisdictions, not unsurprisingly. We do actually have a really fast-moving legislature. Rocket Labs wanted to launch. We had no legislation for a space agency. But Wellington put one together in about 8 months. That's really fast. So the government's shown, quite recently, to be able to move really fast if need be. Do we actually need more legislation to bring something like Stellar into the country? Probably not. Tax is an issue still. We haven't actually seen any ICOs launch from New Zealand. New Zealand companies have done ICOs, but no one's actually issued them directly from New Zealand. We think that some of the fair dealing requirements are really good here. So essentially fair dealing is like a more legal way of saying don't do fraud, don't lie, don't mislead, no deception. More importantly, don't omit. So we see a lot of ICOs out there being not great at doing this. New Zealand would be a great place to try and bring ICOs in, because we actually have rules around this sort of stuff that goes a little bit further than just don't do fraud. And of course, Kiwis, we're hiring in Christchurch, so I'm in the wrong city for this now. Never mind. Stellar and Lumens, I could draw any sort of trend lines on here. You know, if you look from here, yeah, they've gone up, they've come a lot down, and you know, we could do technical analysis all day, and I could try and convince you of anything about the price of Lumens. They go everywhere. I think my honest opinion is I don't care what happens to the price of Lumens. They're a great tool for us. They allow better trading. So the thing with Lumens is that instead of liquidity providers having to make trades between every single asset pair in the world, like just imagine an example trade between New Zealand, the US and Australia. If you wanted those currencies to be tradable really easily, you'd have to make trades individually between each pair of assets. So a New Zealand Australia, a New Zealand US, US Australia, right? However, with Lumens, the idea is that everyone makes their markets in and out of Lumens. So Australia to Lumens, New Zealand to Lumens, US to Lumens, and the protocol actually bridges through those paths. It can bridge through non-Lumen paths as well, but essentially what it means is that for less effort, you get more tradable liquidity, essentially. So that is one of the reasons why people will need Lumens to do the best trading. However, that doesn't necessarily push the price up. But again, I don't care what happens to it. Should you keep looking at Stellar? I think so. It's been around for a while, right? As I mentioned, it was fork or Ripple. You sometimes still see the old currency code. They just used to be called Stellars, which is a little confusing. They kind of went quiet while they were rewriting their code base. Originally, in 2014, because their mandate is to distribute a lot of Lumens and to promote financial inclusion, they went mad with onboarding a lot of users. I can't remember how many it was. I think it might have been 12 or 14 million, which was a number many orders of magnitude higher than what Ripple had at the time. What that did is it ended up breaking consensus, and the network forked. So you had two different versions of the Stellar chain. So realizing that's clearly an issue, they went about rewriting the consensus protocol and then the rest of the protocol around that. So it's really their second time at writing something like Stellar, because Jed, of course, came from Ripple originally before doing Stellar. And while they were at that, they did go and put a lot of other interesting pieces in that makes development a lot easier. Really easy multi-sig, really easy batch transactions for anyone who really knows what that means. The important thing is they went and got their consensus protocol mathematically proven, right? Ripple seems to be going ahead and doing that now as well with Cobalt. So it'll be really interesting. I think we'll see a bit of an arms race between the two companies to see who can come up with a better consensus algorithm. But it's all good, it's competition, right? So happy for that. In 2016, they kind of came out of the dark and started, trying to make partnerships again. And we saw that they had started to make way in Southeast Asia, India, West Africa. Those are the three main areas that they were looking at. And in 2017, right at the end, we saw the partnership with IBM and ClickX, which is what I think introduced a lot of people to Stellar. This is when people started to hear about it. And that was that huge price spike at the end of last year. So they were using Lumens for remittance in Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands. So ClickX being a remittance provider for many years, they've got a heap of accolades. They seem to have been doing quite well, joined up. And the more recent news down the bottom there is of course, as I mentioned, IBM using Stellar for its crypto issuance. So that's very exciting. So we're starting to see a bit more traction now than before. I did want to mention Lightyear. Lightyear is Stellar's for-profit arm, essentially, that's helping with integration. So a lot of people might have heard of it, but no one really knows what they do in the public sphere. We're hoping that they will tell everyone a little bit more about what they're doing in the future. But suffice it to say, they are busy working away and making integrations with their partners. We're almost at the end. We'll be launching into Q&A soon. The only thing I really wanted to mention here is that, should I pay attention to it? I would like to say yes. Stellar's starting to make some good partnerships recently. They're covering a lot of geographies, which is really good because, of course, they're trying to get to those underbanked people. So they need to connect to financial institutions, mobile operators, M-Pesa, those sorts of people all over the world. and of course, we think their connection to the more local area with IBM and ClickX is absolutely fantastic, and we're hoping to see more come out of IBM and Stellar very soon, and some of their partners there. There's Stronghold. We're happy to be working with them. Stellar's mandate is to try and distribute the vast majority of Lumens for free to the wider world. So here's the opportunity for some Kiwis to get some free Lumens. So feel free to take down the QR code there or the link. We will send over your emails to Stellar, and they will send out a short questionnaire to you. I'm not really sure what they're asking about. I think it's, how did you find out about Stellar? Are you vaguely interested in what we're doing? And then they'll set you up with a link to create your Stellar wallet if you don't already have one. Or if you do, you can get a new one, I suppose, and take the Lumens anyway. There we go. So moving into Q&A.
Why do you think there's been such low uptake of the platform for ICOs? Because it still seems to me everything's on Ethereum pretty much at the moment. Second question, if I could just drop it as well, if you can answer it. Are you thinking about moving into the fiat on-ramp thing with Stronghold in New Zealand?
So for the first one, yes, Stellar's trying to get on the ICO, get a piece of that pie. All the developers are on Ethereum, basically. So if you're a business looking to do an ICO and you put any tendrils out to try and find technical people to work for you, they're going to have Ethereum on their CV, Solidity, that sort of thing. As well, Stellar's quite humble and a little bit understated. To their credit, in a lot of ways, they didn't need to raise a lot of money in an ICO type event for themselves, right? They were originally funded through the loan, which was repaid in Lumens by Stripe back in 2014, and they have done a public auction in the past, which is actually what my original startup back in 2014 assisted them with. So I was an early fiat gateway out of New Zealand in Dunedin, Christchurch. So I think that we will see over the next year their PR game pick up a little bit. I hope that doesn't turn into hype and distract them. I really don't think it will, because of the team members they have on board are, I think, a little bit more grounded in making good progress for the sake of making good progress and not just spinning around a lot of hype. That being said, I would like them to be a little bit more out there so we can get more interest from the development community in, because we need those developers to be working in and knowing how to use this platform for businesses to be able to take it up. So I think that even if there's a lot of business interest, we're still going to find a lack of developers a problem. So one of the things they tried mid-2016, when they had finally, they were happy with their new protocol rewrite, they announced a developer giveaway. And they gave away enormous amounts of Lumens to people developing stuff on their platform that now worth absolutely millions of dollars if you'd held on to any of those. So that program still runs. So for developers, individuals all over the world, there's still an incentive to start to write stuff, but people just don't know about it. Don't know that exists. People really just don't have the impetus to start going on Stellar. If I'm a developer and I'm looking for a job in crypto, what am I going to learn? I'm going to learn Ethereum because that's where the jobs are. Which is really unfortunate. But again, we're hoping to see improvement over the next few months. Yeah. Your second question about fiat, yes, Stronghold. You definitely need those currencies on there. There's obviously regulatory issues to work through, both from the money laundering side and securities law, financial products in New Zealand. We're working through that, and we're hoping to be able to say a little bit more about how we're going to enable that very, very shortly. So 100% needed, and we're looking to do that. Yeah.
So as a developer, if I wanted to create a distributed application, can I actually create a distributed application with general purpose programming on Stellar? And if not, if I do the ICO on Stellar, but the application needs to run on a different network like Ethereum or some other smart contract network, how do I bridge between Stellar and Ethereum where the application would actually run?
So Stellar doesn't have a general purpose programming language in it, so you wouldn't be able to write any application that you needed to. It's really around there's certain things you can enforce on tokens, but all that other stuff doesn't exist for a reason. That's to make sure it keeps running quickly and cost effective as a payments network. The bridging thing, it would be the same problem you'd have trying to bridge any two protocols together, really. there are a lot of parties anchoring currencies between the networks. So Stronghold is one of the Ethereum anchors. So we accept Ethereum into our custody and issue Ether into the Stellar network, but that only deals with the currency stuff. There's no special tool in there for creating cryptographically sound bridges between the two protocols. There are some projects that are looking to be the bridges between protocols, so I'm sure that a lot of them, including Stellar, will make themselves available to those sorts of things, but unfortunately there's nothing special at the moment to help out with that.
Hi. Stellar has been around for a while, but we don't really see many anchors. Can you talk about the friction of getting your system online?
Yeah, so the lack of anchors is a big problem for businesses looking to come on to the platform. Without anchors, so if you were a merchant or you're looking to do payment services or something like that, or remitters, without the anchors providing the fiat currency access, so people depositing money and withdrawing money from the crypto world back into the real world, you can't really do much. Unfortunately, for the anchors to come on board, there's a lot of regulatory hoops they have to jump through. Licensing, compliance, putting on staff just to satisfy those requirements. So one of our initial hires in Christchurch was our in-house counsel, who just started this week. She's got a lot of onboarding to do, but that's just because we have such a heavy compliance burden. We've got in our Christchurch office 2 developers and 1 lawyer. It's such a need for us, and that's expensive, right? And this is a network that really doesn't have any customers in because of that, right? So for a lot of people looking to do anchors, and there are a lot of people looking to become anchors, they're approaching Stellar all the time, and we even get approached, people asking us about what it's like to be an anchor. The problem is that they need the customers there. But for the customers to access the businesses, they need the anchors there. So you've got this chicken and egg problem of there's no real fiat in the network, so people aren't building services in it, but then if there's no services, no one's incentivized to put fiat currency in there. So that's a big problem right now. Why we haven't seen that solved over many years, there were some initial anchors back in the first version of the protocol, but essentially that was all lost when they did the rewrite. They did migrate people's balances over in terms of the Lumen balances, but essentially they've started again. So they've gone back to 0 anchors, essentially, early 2016, and now they're trying to get them on. It might be the case that there's a lot of, or there is at least some fiat currency movement that we just don't see as well. So some of those integrations, like the ClickX and IBM thing, well, I don't know what's happening under the hood there, right? They'd have to tell us about that. Your everyday Stellar user probably won't be able to take ownership of those tokens, at least not yet. Right, so there could be fiat movement on the network that is just siloed to certain groups, right? Because you can do that white listing essentially of token ownership, or they might be doing the side chains completely. So there could be stuff happening, but it's the public anchors that we're really missing. Anchors that are accessible to anyone who signs up, not just customers of a bank or customers of a remittance company. How does Stellar go about solving that? They are incentivizing anchors to some degree. They have grant programs, which is essentially based on volume that you're moving in and out, or trade volume, or liquidity provision, that sort of thing. But the main friction is really what legal hurdles am I going to face as an anchor? What are these things? Are they debt securities when we're issuing assets into the network? Are they just asset-backed tokens? Are they what sort of security are they? Those are questions that scare people because solving those issues in some jurisdictions could take hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of legal time. And if you don't have a proven customer base out there, is that really worth going after? That's the unfortunate thing.
When KYC happens on Stellar, who am I really trusting with my information, and why can I trust them?
So KYC in Stellar will probably be done with the anchors. So you're not submitting any information to the network, you're submitting the information to whatever financial institution it is that you're using to get funds in and out of the network, whether that be fiat or crypto or whatever. So that company will, or that institution will look through the KYC data, do whatever checks necessary, and then set a flag on your account. So to the outside world, all they see is that this particular issuer has said, okay, that account can hold my tokens. A lot of the time that'll be KYC, but you can't really tell what that is, and none of your information will actually be there. The bit of sharing KYC information comes through on the compliance server that big schematic of data flying around in all the boxes, which will essentially be, if I'm at one bank and I'm sending to another bank, your information might be shared then, which is true in the real world to some degree anyway. So information is not passed directly on the protocol. It's on another level. Yep. And it's up to each issuer to, give you the privacy policies that describe how your information will be shared. Yeah.
Who holds the private key? The anchor or the person?
Yeah, so there's going to be a bit of both in the network. For Stronghold at the moment, we hold private keys on behalf of our users. However, we do allow withdrawal of those funds to accounts that you hold the private key of. So both, right? So you can either choose to have a managed account, username, password, we hold the key, or we actually multi-sig it off to another address. Or you can choose to bypass Stronghold directly, so not use our account system, but just use the anchor and have your funds in your own account. You manage the key, or it might be a key managed by another wallet provider. So you get the choice, essentially. The only thing is, we need to know, from the Stronghold's point of view, who that wallet belongs to. So if you're outside our system, there's extra steps that we have to take to say, okay, you've gone through our Know Your Customer process, we know who you are, you have to tell us, well, this address that I have a private key to is also mine, therefore it's part of our whitelisted circle. So there's a few extra things we have to do, but you still have the choice. Yep. Yeah, I never followed Cryptopia too much before coming back to the country. And with Stronghold today, at least being a retail cryptocurrency exchange, to some degree they're a competitor. What I am aware of, though, is that very late last year they registered on the Financial Services Provider Register. However, they had been providing financial services for some time longer. So I can only imagine that there was some chat there. We also know that they lost their banking relationship earlier in the year. Banks in general in New Zealand are very, very, very afraid of the KYC scheme. Unfortunately, it's the case that even if say Stronghold took on terrorists' money, it still could fall on the bank. It's their compliance officer that can get in trouble. There is an exemption in law that provides when the financial institution or the anchor is a reporting entity, that really it should be up to them to do the KYC, and as long as the bank knows that and can request information, that should satisfy them. In practice, we don't see that happening. There's a report being written up that is being presented to government, I think in a few weeks, Joshua from Inspiral. So we're really hoping that, the main thing he's identified there is as a blocker to blockchain companies, one, moving to New Zealand and innovating in New Zealand, is access to banking, right? If you can get a bank account in New Zealand and you are in crypto, you're doing something pretty good. You've got some great KYC policies that have been drafted up, or you know who to talk to in the banks. But once you get one, you could easily lose it, as we've seen with Cryptopia.
And in your estimation, what do you believe crypto constitutes a debt security or a debt derivative?
Totally depends on the individual features of that particular token. For the fiat anchoring, on advice, it's not going to be a financial product for us. It's not going to be a debt security so long as we know who all the holders are and the funds are held in bare trust, which means we can't distribute it freely to the world. We have to KYC every single holder, which is why Stellar is a great platform to be doing it. So the token in Stellar has any token in Stellar is defined by two things, an asset code and an issuer, right? So it might be US dollar Stronghold or US dollar Bank of America. Those are completely different things, and it's up to your knowledge of who that issuer is and your trust to them that you take it on belief that, okay, there actually is $1 behind every token. There's nothing special about that value in the network. So I could just define, anyone can create an account and start issuing all sorts of rubbish on the network, and there is all sorts of strange things on there, right? Jed issued hugs on the network, so you get one of those, fly to FCF and give Jed a hug if you want. So essentially, it's up to you. If you want to make a basket of various currencies, give it a cool name, put it on the network, but you have to convince people that for every one of those, there is some allocation of funds somewhere else for them. Yeah. If you can convince them to buy that without anything behind it, totally fine also. The network doesn't know or care. You're still going to have to trust whoever's got custody of those cryptocurrencies somewhere. So bringing in Ethereum or Bitcoin really is the same to the network as bringing in fiat currencies. So you still have to trust that, okay, there is some money somewhere that collateralizes that token. However, with crypto, at least you can actually point to addresses and make some more attestations to proof of reserves. So it gets a little bit better in that case, but it's still not perfect. There's still kind of air gaps between some things. Yeah.
Could you talk about the differences between a fiat on Stellar Lumens versus, say, Tether or other stable coins in regards to trading specifically?
Yeah, so I'm not so sure what's happened to Tether recently, but at least as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of people that I've talked to about Tether, because yes, we get asked about it all the time when we were, when I was back in San Francisco, and no one could agree on whether you could actually withdraw the stuff. According to their information, you could certainly withdraw, you could get the fiat money back if you had tethers, and it sounds like some people did, but a lot of people also thought you couldn't. So I think what was unclear in Tether's case was, really, were there reserve funds somewhere, and if so, how did you access them? If there were reserve funds, how do we audit them? Because didn't they fire their auditor or something? That was very suspicious. Why would you do that? If you didn't have the funds, I suppose. And I don't know, there wasn't like a Tether chain, was there? It was just balances that were...
Asset on the Omni chain?
It was actually, was it? Oh, well then I always thought it was just balances given to exchanges. Okay, I stand corrected then. Okay. Tether and anchored fiat share a lot in common. The idea behind them is that there's going to be withdrawal and deposit of that asset guaranteed to you, is really what you get. Some anchors will also promise that they'll hold the funds there. A lot of them won't. They'll do reserve banking. We know of at least one anchor that has said that they're going to invest the money in other things that aren't just, treasury bills or something like that. I think that in Tether's case, there was just lack of clarity around could you actually get money in and out of it from the real world versus just buying it in and out of it in an exchange. We also hope that the institutions that put anchored fiat into Stellar are regulated, providers that are audited or can be audited and show proof of funds, something like that would be preferable.
So obviously you're doing, KYC in terms of your, US dollar, backed funds and who can hold it. How do you deal with the fact about, I might have got paid large amounts of US dollars from different people on the network and it can go back and forth on the network and then I go to withdraw it. And how do you deal with the fact that it's like, really, did I actually sell a house, or like, should I really have received these funds versus it being money laundering or something like that?
So with our USD token, we will identify all holders of the fund. So wherever you've received those 250,000 US dollar tokens from, we should know who that is as well. From there, it's up to fraud detection, just to see if there's anything suspicious about your transfer. Tripping over those sorts of figures, you'd be subject to enhanced due diligence, customer due diligence, and we'd need to collect proof of source of funds, use of account, those sorts of information from you. So it just turns into standard banking stuff. If you had brought that using tokens that we didn't control or weren't KYC'd, then that's a little bit different. But that's also similar to cash, right? So say you brought it with Bitcoins anchored by someone who didn't do KYC. There's a lot of anchors in there that don't do KYC on their Bitcoin holders. Then yeah, we wouldn't actually see maybe where those funds started to come from. And yeah, that is problematic.
Is that happening every time I do a transfer on Stellar or only when I do withdrawals?
Anytime you want the token in your account. So that means receiving or making a buy order.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on Stellar.
On Stellar. If you aren't KYC whitelisted, you won't be able to do those operations. Yeah. So anytime anyone has the token, we know who they are and we can match that to funds on the blockchain or in the bank. That's our legislative requirement. Otherwise, it'll look like a debt security.
Sometimes does that mean I send a transfer and it doesn't go through?
Yes, it will fail. You won't be able to do it. It'll stay with the person trying to send it. Yep. It's a protocol level feature, which is what we need really. Yep.
Will the fiat tokens issued on your network be compatible with the Stellar decentralized exchange, or will they be stuck within your ecosystem?
They will be, we will need to make sure that all the users are identified to us. That could either be done using our interface, or we are hoping to integrate with Stellar's version of a trading platform, which they will be releasing in a few months, hopefully. As long as they're identified with us, they can be traded and held outside of Stronghold's UI. So they're not totally free. We need to know who you are. We can get that information from, say, people running Stellar X. They can do the KYC and pass it to us. And because we know who they are and we know what their level of KYC is, that's good enough for us in some cases. But total randoms to us, they won't be able to hold it. So it's middle ground. Yeah. But yes, they will be available to be traded on the decentralized exchange. They're not going to be somewhere else, only tradable on Stronghold or something like that. So you could take them into other wallets, you could take them to Stellar Term, any of those other wallets, and trade them as long as we know who you are. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much, everyone, for coming. I think that's all the questions, but feel free to come and say hello. I'm only here for tonight, going back to Christchurch tomorrow morning. But yeah, thank you very much.